Alright guys, so I did a couple of minutes work on these two on the last video. This is the original Puch Maxi S with the wooden number plate, and this is the one that's the donor for the frame swap. Since these are both Puch Maxi S's, it's going to be difficult to tell which one I'm talking about, and it's all going to get quite confusing. So my thoughts on this were, the one with the wooden number plate, we'll call that one Woody, and it would only make sense that this one that I'm taking apart at the moment was Buzz then, wouldn't it, surely? So I'm currently stripping down Buzz and removing all the bits I need to make it light enough to be able to shake the tank around and do a tank clean, get rid of all the rust. I'm going to put all those bits straight onto Woody so that I don't lose them. I'm then going to build Buzz back up again, either with its own parts and strip Woody down for a rebuild, or build Buzz up with new parts. I'm not entirely sure yet, but we should in the end have one standard as it should have been out of the factory, and one slightly tuned and with a different engine, which I'll tell you more about on a different video, but I'm really excited about it. So at the moment I'm just removing the exhaust, two 10mm nuts for the header pipe, and also another, I think it was another 10mm nut holding it on to the bracket that comes out the frame at the back. I'm using the impact gun wherever I can. I've not got a hairy back, that's a tattoo that I never got coloured in. But apparently from a distance it makes me look like some kind of ape creature, so yeah, that is a tattoo, it's not hair. These engine bolts are a bit questionable. One of them I don't think is original, two of them don't have nuts on, so that's quite... a lot of this bike has just been thrown together, to be honest. I bought it for £60 a long time ago and more or less forgot about it. I got two other Puch Maxis about the same time. And the person who'd had this one before me was an old boy who tried restoring it, a bit like the Orange Gorelli actually. He tried restoring it and everything was just put on sort of loosely and needed tightening up. There's the engine off. E50, it's the not the clamshell one, it's the other one which you can actually do clutch work on, which is good without splitting the whole case. Let's see if it is seized or not by taking this beast off. So yeah, anyway, a lot of it's just kind of thrown together, so it is going to need going through anyway, which is fine for me taking it apart. It turns over and actually the compression's quite good even without the exhaust on, so that's nice. A potential candidate for a rebuild. The other frame that I have, the frame for Woody, I bought pretty cheap on eBay about 2 years ago just to test out cleaning out tanks before I started actually doing that on my own tanks, which is what that video of the tank being cleaned was all about. By that point I'd already decided to keep it. So these pedal cranks, there's the actual crank itself, the cotter pin's missing off the one I took off first, and then a shim, and then there we are, look, shim, sort of rubber, I suppose that's like a solid bearing, and there should be the same on the other side as well. As with many things on this bike, it's sort of missing. It's the same with these rear shock absorbers as well. They'd be alright, but one of them is missing. God, I can't talk. One of them is missing the rubber bush from one end, so I'm going to have to get a new set, unfortunately. I may try and steal one out of an old scrap Thomas, we'll see. Next up are the four 14mm bolts that hold the swing arm onto the frame at the pivot. Now, these are notoriously difficult because they're put onto a very high torque setting when they're put on there in the first place. Then they get all the road spray and everything and corrode, so they're never easy to get out. My impact gun unfortunately can't manage it because it's only a little one, although it is quite awesome for the price. I got it from Aldi for about 30 quid I think. I'm using GT85 with PTFE, which is like penetrating oil, a bit like WD-40. It's quite good for rust proofing things as well. After a while and a lot of wrenching, the GT85 has done its stuff, so I'm removing pretty much the whole back end in one piece to make it easier, because I'm just going to put it straight on the other bike, hopefully. And there we are, this is our prize. One big lump of Maxi swing arm and wheel assembly. Nice rack. So we're swapping bikes now. We're going to start assembling this one. I won't show you the whole process of assembling it, but we're starting off with the rear rack, if I can get it on, followed by the little spacer thing to stop you pinching the frame too tightly and bending it. Two nuts, top and bottom, bottom one just basically holds the spacer in and keeps it clamped around the seat post. I do actually have a Puch long seat which came attached to a Corelli, so I'm going to be putting that on here. Unfortunately that means I'll have to find a new seat for the Corelli, but never mind. Here is a view of the operating theatre as it stands. I'm trying to get the mounting plate out that attaches the swing arm at the moment so I can swap it over into the other bike. There's the engine. Now unfortunately the plate I'm trying to get out is attached quite well because I've undone all the bolts and everything that hold it on, but it's sort of wedged into the bodywork. So it's taking a bit of bashing to get out unfortunately, but here it is. Now unfortunately, as you saw, it is quite rusty, and ideally I'd be sorting that out properly and then painting it to prevent it happening again. As ever, I just don't have time to do a proper job today, so I'm going to smear it with grease to prevent it getting any worse and move on to the next job, which is removing this headlamp. Woody already has that awesome vintage egg style headlamp, so this headlamp will be staying with Buzz for the time being. There's not actually much left to strip off this bike now. Front wheel and the front number plate, and I think that is just about it. There's also the handlebars, but I think they're just held on by the cables now anyway, so it's just a case of the front brake cable being the last one, and off they came. I'm using the impact gun to liberate the front wheel, which might well be cheating, but it also saves time when you're quite as stuck as I am for time. I mean, look, I have to sprint off and grab things. So yeah, just taking the number plate off now. Unfortunately, this number plate didn't survive. I think it's an aftermarket one anyway, but it's cracked, look, so that'll be being replaced, probably with a pressed tin one. Just got a few final little bits to do now, like the horn and little piddly things like that I keep forgetting about. And then basically it'll be more or less a bare frame and forks that we can do the tank cleaning on, which you may have already seen depending on the order I put these videos up in. So now it's time to build up the other bike, or at least start building up the other bike. I'm not going to have time to do a great deal of it today. As I mentioned before, the swing arm plate is quite rusty. Now what I'd like to have done with that would be to grind it down a little bit, the rust on the swing arm plate, with a wire wheel or something like that. Then put some rust cure stuff on it. I quite often use Hammerite Cure Rust because it's fairly cheap for what it does. Then paint it, put it on, all the rest of it. But for now, as ever, not enough time to do that. So I'm just literally going to put a layer of grease on it just to stop the rust getting to it, and I imagine we'll be stripping this bike down again in the near future once it's been checked over by the DVLA. As I've mentioned in previous videos about this bike, it's being built up so that the DVLA can inspect it for originality and hopefully give it its original number plate back, although I don't hold up much hope. These swing arm plate mounting bolts are surprisingly nightmarish to get in and out as well, I've found. I've never done it before, obviously. This is the first time I've took a Maxi S apart, but I was quite surprised at how difficult they are to get in and out. I know they've got quite a high torque setting, but still, you know, you'd think they would actually go back in at least. But yeah, I did struggle a bit with that. So now, get the front wheel on, so we've got a rolling chassis, and then I've got to take it out the way because I've got some spraying to do. This is my cheap Poundland black spray paint, and this is a mix-matched pair of rear shocks that I've got. I bought them for £5 for the pair, so we'll see. If one of them is slightly stronger than the other, then we'll just have to sort that out, maybe buy some fresh ones. But at the end of the day, as long as they're both black, it's a start at least, surely. Now, the shocks that came with it, one of them didn't have a bushing in at one end, so I'm just replacing the pair. And here we are, nicely sprayed. I've only managed to do one coat because I'm quite short of time. This is a couple of weeks after I filmed the video of spraying them. And this is the one we're replacing. The one on the other side didn't have a bushing, as I said, at the top, but this one is complete with a full complement of bushes. It's just not as nice, so I'm going to swap that one out as well. I needed a top mounting bolt for the shocks. I've got a second-hand one here. I'm going to replace some of the nuts with stainless acorns and see how we do. So I've done some of the work. Team Overkill have been in and told me that I need to use a 2-ton trolley jack to hold up the back end of a moped. I've got these bolts in at the bottom, then on Nylox. At the top here, this is that ridiculous bolt. It was from a job lot of Puch Maxi hardware for £2 off eBay, so I can't really grumble it's too long. Right, I've swapped the bottom bolts around because I was worried the acorns, well, the Nylox were no good, and I was worried that the acorns would interfere with the spokes. The Nylox, the thread didn't actually get all the way into the nylon bit. And here we are. I've now put the back wheel on just so I can wheel it around. The brake plate's not attached, but this is the situation we're in. I think I've got another top bolt somewhere for it, so we're going to go with that. This stand's been handy, by the way. That stand was 16 quid from Aldi, and you can have 3 bikes on it, so it's quite good. I'm a bit worried about it bending the spokes though. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have a Gorelli with a Puch long seat on it, and this is it. So I'm going to try and remove that. Meanwhile, in my executive storage unit in the shape of a Jaguar, next to an overflowing drain, I've got a little treat. I bought this for Buzz. Buzz is the one that's going to get mildly modified. Now, I needed one of those plates that holds a swing arm on, and they're 17 quid, and this was 20 quid on eBay. So, I mean, you know, bargain. I think it's an MLM swing arm. They also do different ones. There's robot swing arms and all that, but I think this one's made by MLM. It's very, very sturdy, which is quite handy. And it's also got the rubber bit in there, the rubber bush, so I don't have to buy one of them. That would have been another £5. And it allows you to run a wider tyre, which I'm probably not going to do at the moment, but it gives me the option in future. So that can go back there in the dry. And I'll carry on working on Buzz now. We swapped over from Woody. Okay, so those of you that are paying attention will know that we've just been working on Woody with the rear shocks and everything. We're now switched over to Buzz, even though it's the same colour. I thought I'd tell you that anyway, so that you don't get confused like I easily do. I'm currently putting grease, just normal grease gun grease, on the inside of the rubber bush for the swing arm. I'm working on a door outside. It's a door suspended on baby milk tins, which is the optimal way to fix a moped. If you ever need to on a swing arm, this is how to do it. Get a door, take it off its hinges, put it on some baby milk tins at the end. You'll see why that's so advantageous in a minute. So I've got the rubber bushing on, and now I'm trying to install that swing arm fixing plate thing that I was talking about earlier, and it is a bit of a struggle. And the reason for that is I'm doing it wrong, and it turns out the correct way to do it is if you come in from what would be the back of the bike with it flat, put it on exactly the opposite of where it's supposed to be, turn it over 180 degrees on the pivot, so you kind of put it on and then roll it round to where it's supposed to be. It goes on just fine, but if you try and put it in roughly the position it would be in when you bolt it up, like I've been doing, it won't go in because the frame is crimped together more towards the front, if that makes sense, so it won't fit. Now the tricky part here is trying to get it in position on the rubber bush, because the rubber bush has got 2 kind of ridges that go crossways on it, which mark up with the joins of where the plate meets the swing arm, and you need to get them lined up. So it took me a little while, but eventually the swing arm is in place and I can bolt the thing up. Not quite as horrific and difficult as the OEM swing arms, probably because all the hardware is nice and fresh and not rusty, but it did take a little bit of doing. Note my makeshift bench made of a door wobbling around and getting in the way as well. This is what I was talking about the advantages of doing it that way. Just to make the back of this bike look even prettier, I've got these MKX shocks. They're 280mm adjustable. I had no idea what length to get, so I just guessed basically. So they're pretty good, and they come with these M10 to M8 reducing things as well for the mounting bolts. So I was going to fit those, but I've had a bit of a change of heart. It turns out the frame's more rusty underneath than I thought it was. The tank's, I think, flash rusting again, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to give it more attention. I'm not that keen on the paint job either. It's a rattle can one, and it's not been done very well, and there's no lacquer on it. So I'm thinking, strip it down, spray it a different colour. So I'm going to be taking that swing arm off again, unfortunately. Do the tank again properly, maybe even seal it, and that'll give us something to be going on with. In the meantime, Woody will be built up as she is, but unfortunately the reveal for the new engine on Buzz will be delayed. However, I may need to rebuild it anyway, and to give you a bit of a clue as to what engine it is, I may also have to look at changing out one of the transmission damping components, shall we say. I don't want to give too much away, but if anyone that's worked on one of these engines will know exactly what I'm talking about and which engine it is. So hopefully I'll see you in another video very soon. I'm nearly finished with the Gorelli wheels video, which has taken over a year, so that should be epic. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, guys.